Hey guys, today I'm in the greenhouse talking about one of my favorite topics, and it's actually one of the most popular topics of all time on my channel, and that is creating DIY or homemade heaters. This heater that I'm creating today will put out massive amounts of heat. You can cook on it. It will warm a room very quickly. And this particular one probably puts out more heat than any heater that I've done so far. So I'm going to show you step by step how to do it. It's only a 3-product common items you can get everywhere, any hardware store, a lot of grocery stores. So it's something that will work perfectly to heat your home in an emergency. This isn't for a daily heater. This is something you'd want to use as an emergency, or if you're just wanting to heat up maybe a shed or like this, a greenhouse, and it's very, very safe and very low cost. So the first thing we're going to start with are these metal cans you can purchase online, and you may be able to get them at some of your local hardware stores, but this is a paint can, never used, no paint's ever been in it. It's not made out of stainless steel, although it looks like it. So if there's any type of coating in it, you want to burn first, the first burn you want to do outside that might burn off anything that's been sprayed on it, maybe some type of preservative. But as for this particular can, there's nothing on it. It's just simply a metal can, and it's very safe, and I'm going to show you the first step. But one thing I forgot to mention about this particular heater, it also contains a powered fan that does not require electricity, so it will disperse the heat throughout the room. So I'm going to show you that towards the middle or the end of the video about how this heater becomes a powered unit that disperses air. It just doesn't heat ambiently the temperature right around it. It actually moves the air around the room. Really simple to do, and it's really an ingenious idea that's been around for decades. Now the first thing we want to do to our paint can is we want to add some just common sand, dry as we can get it. This sand has a little bit of moisture in it, but it would be better if we had a pure dry sand that has no moisture, and that's a little bit hard to come across around here because we've had so much rain. But we're going to put about 2 inches of sand into the bucket, about that high up, because we're going to need a little barrier of any possible heat from the bottom of the heater. And this is the container. This isn't actually the heat part. There is an item that goes inside that will act as our heater, but we want to create a barrier around that to make it safer to the touch, and also anything it's sitting on, it's not going to get overheated or cause a scorching or a stain like on this wood right here. So remember, sand is one of those things that will make it safer. If you don't have sand, you could place this bucket on something like a ceramic dish, plate, towel. You could put it on something like a pot or pan just to get it off of anything that might be damaged by heat, any type of wood or countertop. So just remember, if you have sand, it's great. If you don't, it's not critical. It's just an optional step. Now the heating component of this tabletop heater that you can store in your pantry for 10 years and forget about it, put a post-it note on it, and if you suddenly need emergency heat, this is the item to have. But this heater contains the world's largest wick. You think of a candle wick as being maybe a 1/16 of an inch tiny, but this particular heater is actually one of it probably is the largest candle wick you can imagine. But this portion right here, our inner can, I believe it's quart size, but anyways, we're not quite high enough. We want this can on the inside to be raised up right here at the same level or just below the level, so we can, again, put this lid back on it, store it away, and forget about it. So just remember, depending on the type of lid you have for your gallon container, this one is right at the same level, and so I'm going to put this can, more sand in it, and have it close to the top. But this right here, let's make sure I may have this upside down. There we go. This right here is actually elevated, so you're going to hit this with a rubber hammer or maybe a wooden mallet so you don't damage it. But that way you can put this interior, the heater portion, as close to the top as possible. I'm going to show you how to use some copper pipe to turn this into a stove as well. But again, you just hit it gently, put a post-it note on it, say emergency heater, and you're ready to go. It will have the fuel in it. It will have fully self-contained, and I'll show you some ways to even have the lighting utensils ready to go inside the can. So once something happens, hurricane, snowstorm, power outage, whatever happens, having about 3 or 4 of these in your pantry will really save the day and really make it easy to heat a room. Now I want to give you a quick tip on a way, because a lot of times you can't open these with your fingers. So if suddenly you find yourself in a situation you don't have the right type of opener, a paint can opener, you can tape a large washer to the top of one of these cans so you'll have an opener. Remember, you have one can inside of the other, so this can is your inner can, but I'm going to demonstrate. I've sealed this properly. I'm going to show you how a washer can open one of these cans. Very easy. Now you could try it with a fork or spoon, but if you just want something that's already attached to your can, let's say you're going to use this on a camping trip and you find yourself in the middle of nowhere and you don't have anything to open the can, having the opener attached to the top of the can is a great idea. So there you go, it's sealed. Now if you forget and the only thing you have is a coin, let's reseal it. Okay, let's try it with a coin. This is going to be a little bit harder. You don't have quite as much leverage. But still, even a coin will open one of these in an emergency. But I do recommend using some painter's tape. And you can just tape it to the top. It doesn't leave a sticky residue. This type of tape is one of my favorite types because you can just tape things and you don't have that sticky residue left after being out in the heat. You can just peel it off and it comes off cleanly. And then you can use it to open your can. You have something, like I said, if you're on a camping trip, have this stored away in your camping gear. It's a great thing to have as an opener, which will save you a lot of headaches from having to look for it because it's all self-contained. Now, the other thing I'm going to recommend is that you keep a small box of matches also either taped to the side where you can see it close to the top. You're doing it towards the bottom because you may not realize the matches are in there when you go to light your heater if you light it with another source such as that type of lighter. But anyways, just keep your matches and your coin taped to the top of the can so you've got everything ready to go. It's all self-contained and it's easy to use. Now I mentioned earlier in the video that this heater, stove, whatever you want to call it, and you could also, depending on the fuel you use, it also can generate light. If you use a very pure fuel, the flame can be almost invisible, and that's really a safer flame to have. But if you're using this outdoors, you might use a less pure fuel to generate light. But the wick is this right here, just a common roll of toilet paper. And what you want to do is you want to stuff this entire roll of toilet paper. Not easy to do, it takes a little bit of finesse, but you want to remove the inner cardboard roll and you want to force it in there. Now if you have the oversized extra large toilet paper rolls, you're probably going to use up some of the toilet paper and then try to insert it into the can. As you can see, this is quite a bit larger than the interior of the can, so you're going to have to use a little bit of brute force to get it to go in there. So again, if you have the double-sized rolls, you're going to want to use it and then wait till it gets about halfway down and then insert it. Now I've already done that on this particular can with a very large roll. It's inserted in there. You're going to ask, well, won't a toilet paper roll burn up in a matter of minutes? Nope, not with our fuel. That will act as a wick and not just an open flame toilet paper and paper just burn away in a matter of minutes. It will last for hours and hours and hours and put out a massive amount of heat. So let's put the second roll in there and I'll show you how to go from there. Now we want to reseal our interior can because we're going to be pouring sand into our gallon-sized container, and so we want to make sure that no sand gets into our wick or into our burn chamber there. So we're just going to take that out just for a second. We're still not quite high enough. I'm going to put a little bit more sand in it. I'm going to try to level it out there. Now, if it does get knocked over or anything like that while it's in storage, you can come back and just kind of shake it and maybe take the top off and make sure everything is still exactly as it should be. But once you pack the sand around the edges, you're not coming all the way to the top with the sand, maybe within about a ½ an inch of the interior can. It's not quite high enough, so we're just going to add a little bit more sand, and then we'll come in with our dry sand and fill up around the sides. Now, the sand itself can capture heat and slowly radiate it out as well. So it kind of acts as if you've ever been camping and you had a campfire with some stones around it, and you once the fire went out, you put the stones closer to your sleeping bags. Those stones can continue to radiate out heat throughout several hours during the night and help keep you warm if all you have is a sleeping bag. So there we are. We're right below the surface. We've got our can. Now we're going to add more sand around the perimeter. Now we're going to try to make sure our can is as straight as possible, pack it a little bit, and then we're going to take our fingers and go around the perimeter of the can and just pack the sand down. We're going to use the sand as a way to create a stove, and so the sand is optional, but it's important if you're wanting to have a stable stove there. Then we're going to take a toothbrush and we're going to clean both the outside can's rim out, and we're going to also do that on the interior can. Just get as much of that sand off of that as possible. We want to try to keep the sand out of our wick area. Just clean it up there and we can move on to the next step. Now I want to talk just a second about the fuel you're going to use to make this work. And rubbing alcohol and other types of alcohols are very important. That's our basic fuel, but the purity of the alcohol is also going to determine any fuels, carbon monoxide, vapors, or anything like that. This is a 99% alcohol, and this I believe is 70%. These are not going to burn, or especially this one, is not going to burn as cleanly. Like I said, the more pure alcohol, and these are a little bit more on the expensive side, so I would recommend going to your hardware store and picking up a can like this of denatured alcohol. It burns cleanly, it's safe, and it's designed as a fuel for stoves. So this is the kind you want to get. It's not expensive, and it will last for quite a while. You can see the container size is a lot larger, probably the equivalent of about 4 or 5 of these smaller size bottles, and maybe even 10 of these really small 99% bottles that are kind of expensive. So denatured alcohol is the recommended product I would use. Now, as far as safety goes, I'd always recommend having the carbon monoxide detector, a smoke detector, and the most important thing is a fire extinguisher. If you're using this inside, obviously you're going to want to go with the cleanest fuel possible. You can set it on a stove where you have a vent that goes to the outside. That would heat up a kitchen. If you have an unused fireplace, you don't have firewood, it'd be good to set this type of stove inside of your fireplace. But just remember, you still want to have ventilation, and you still want to have the proper detection equipment to make sure it's as safe as possible. If you're using this on a camping trip outside, then it really doesn't matter about fumes and vapors so much because you're in the open air. You could even use this in a tent, but again, the denatured alcohol is going to be the cleanest burn and be the safest. Again, even in a tent, I would have those battery operated detection equipment in case the CO2 levels get too high, or if something happens, it tips over and it causes a small fire. It'd wake you up instantly. A lot of people have been killed, not necessarily by fire, but by the smoke caused by the fire. Now that we've got everything in place, we're going to add in our denatured alcohol. I want the cleanest burn possible here in the greenhouse. And again, if you're using this on the inside of your home, you want the cleanest possible burn. If you're using this to create light, then of course you want to make sure that you have that proper ventilation. But the way you're going to add this, you're going to take just a common kitchen funnel, make a small indentation in your toilet paper, and you want to add this slowly because the paper towel, the toilet paper has to absorb this. So just do it slowly, a little bit at a time, and just allow it to wick into the toilet paper, into our monster size wick. So you can see this is not an instant thing. It takes a little while for the toilet paper. And we're going to fill that inner one the inner can. We're going to fill it as close to the top as possible because we want this to burn for as long as possible. Now, when your toilet paper has absorbed all of the denatured alcohol, or whatever type of alcohol you're using has absorbed as much as it will take, you'll notice that the funnel is just very slowly going. You don't want to overfill this because you don't want spillage out into the sand. You want all the fuel to remain inside around our wick. Now, I want to show you one more thing about the denatured alcohol. So if you'll notice here, denatured alcohol has a very specific use. If you'll look to the left there, it says for marine stoves, center alcohol burning stoves, and if you notice to the right, it says clean, odorless, smokeless flame. So this is one of the safest fuels you can use. If you decide to go with a less pure fuel, remember, ventilation is key. And even with this, you want to consider ventilation. Please read all of the directions on the back because it gives a lot of directions on exactly how to use it in this most safe manner. So don't take my word for it. Use the container, and it gives you all the instructions on how to safely use it. Now, this is in a foreign language. This is English. So just remember, carefully read through and you'll learn exactly how to use this in its safest way possible. Now, in my previous video where I'd made a homemade heater, I got over 5,000 comments in 72 hours. And there's just no way for me to answer those. I always tell everybody, if you're a subscriber, I'll put you to the front of the line and answer those questions as quickly as possible. But I would literally spend a week reading and answering all the questions. But one of the most common questions I kept seeing over and over is, how do you put it out? Well, there's two ways to put it out, and this applies to the previous video. You can lean your head over and blow across it, and usually that will put out the flame. But if the flame's really at the very beginning, you got a lot of fuel in there, just take the lid, drop it into place. Don't burn your fingers. Wear a pair of gloves when you're doing this, and it will smother the fire out. It will eat up all the oxygen, and your flame will go out quickly. Remember that the bottom of this can is going to be relatively cool, but the top of it is going to be red hot, so you don't want to touch that without a really thick pair of leather gloves or some type of safety equipment like that. You'll burn the tips of your fingers very quickly. Now, I hope you'll watch to the end because I'm going to show you a monster size edition of this particular heater, and you wouldn't believe it would heat a very large greenhouse like this to a comfortable temperature. But everything in here is pretty safe from freezing temperatures. It's just I don't want it to get down into the teens or 20s because it could damage some of the root systems. But the last part of the video, I'll give you a quick look at what I think could make a monster size heater. Now, this is something you would absolutely have to set into a fireplace or in an open shed or something like that where you don't have to worry so much about carbon monoxide. But again, the fuel type is really important because anytime you have an open flame, you have the potential for catastrophe, and that's what I want to say. So many people ask that in the comments again about flame, danger, things like that. Yes, of course a flame is dangerous, so just remember, safety is paramount. Now, I mentioned this just in its basic form, just like this makes a great heater, but what if you wanted to cook on it? Well, you can take some of these copper rods, and I found these on Amazon. Everything I'm using today, I'll put links in the description, and you just want to put them around, make a triangle there, and then you want to take your lid and make sure that's not quite down. Make sure they're all the way down to the bottom. Your lid has a lip on it there, this particular one, so you can put it up here and you could actually cook on it. Small cooking devices, of course, and you could safely cook on it. Now, you want to be careful, of course. You can knock it over because you're elevated. You can also cut these off, make them lower where it's closer to the flame. You'll have a much more intense heat. But I'm going to show you how to turn this into a powered heater that will circulate air throughout the room. And it's really simple to do. It only requires one very special device that a lot of fireplace stores and a lot of hardware stores will sell. All right, so we're going to light our heater. I'm not really that fond of these type of heaters because of the safety components. A little bit harder to start. I like my torch lighter better, but we're just going to light this, allow it to heat this up, and then I'll add the air circulation device to the top. Now, this flame is burning so clean you cannot see it. You can kind of see the vapor there coming off. It's a little bit harder to see, but again, it is burning and it is heating up very quickly. I'm going to show you the one device that will turn it into a powered circulating fan. So this type of fan you find around a lot of stoves and heating appliances. Just set that on top, and at this bottom portion, this is not powered by electricity in any way, but as the bottom of this heats up, the fan will actually start working. So we'll take a few minutes and just allow this can to heat up. It's putting off a lot of heat right there, and this paint can lid is also heating up quite a bit, and it will eventually start working our fan to circulate air throughout the greenhouse. All right, so while that's heating, we're going to do some temperature test here, and I'm trying to get that in focus there. So you can see the outside of the can is relatively cool, but up here on top of this is quickly rising up, and I'm trying to get right there at the fan, 300 degrees. I saw 350 earlier, but as that heats up, and I'm trying to get it just in the right spot, but as this heats up, you'll see this fan starting to work. You can see the base of that fan is getting really hot, and it's going to help circulate the heat around the greenhouse. So as you can see, this fan is running really fast and is pushing the heat out away from the can, around the can, up in this area, very nice and warm, above the can, nice and warm. But when you touch the sides of the can, it's cool to the touch. Very cool. I could pick this can up and move it around the greenhouse. I can put on my gloves, remove the fan, the lid, our copper pipes in there, and then just put the lid back on, and we'll have the flame extinguished if you can't blow it out. One thing I want to show you, think, well, the toilet paper is going to burn up very quickly. No, it's actually acting as a wick. I'm going to put the camera really close to the flame so you can see the toilet paper is just as it was when we put it in the can. All right, let's take a look at our world's largest toilet paper wick. You can see that, yes, there is a flame there. It's almost completely invisible. You see a little bit of orange and yellow in it from time to time, but the toilet paper itself is completely just as it was when we started it. It's acting as a massive giant wick, and it's putting out a lot of heat. And since we have the special fan on top that I'll put a link in the description if you want to buy one of those, that fan is slowly circulating throughout the greenhouse. If you're in a small room, this would definitely work. But What if you were in a large room and you wanted to create something that would heat a very large area? I'm going to show you that as well, and it's not using toilet paper. So I mentioned I was going to show you what I feel would heat a very large area. Now obviously this is something you can't set on top of your stove. This is very heavy with a lot of sand in it. And I haven't completely put it together, but it's just an idea that popped into my head that if a paint can would heat a small room, something like this feed pail that I got, I think it was, I'm trying to remember exactly where I bought it. It was some hardware store. It could have been Tractor Supply, so don't hold me to that. Now this is a half-used roll of paper towels, and it's usually quite a bit larger, and it would be more snug fit. Now this stainless steel container is actually a 3-set I purchased on Amazon, and it's basically just for storage. It comes with some tops, but you could also use it as this type of heater. You would do the same thing with this monster size heater, bury this right at the top level, have lots of sand in there, so only the heat is going out into the room. You don't have to worry about the sides of this or the bottom overheating. This only goes about, there's probably 4 or 5 inches of sand below that, even if you bury it right to that point. Do the same thing with the paper towels. Like I said, this is a half-used roll, so if you're using a whole brand new roll, you're going to push it in there. You may have to do some creative cutting, add in your denatured alcohol, and you have a monster size heater that would heat a large area. Again, safety is paramount. I always recommend Simply Safe. It's the product I have in my own house is Simply Safe. I use a carbon monoxide detector, smoke detector, and I have fire extinguishers in the kitchen, basement, garage, and those places, so it's very safe to use something like this. Again, you got to know if there's carbon monoxide in the air, so those detectors can save a life. So anyways, I'll put a link to those as well because I purchased those a few years ago, and I'm very happy with Simply Safe, and I'm not being paid in any way, not sponsored. But again, this would make a giant heater for a larger space, and it would be quite a bit better if you had to heat it. Now this came with a metallic lid. It's somewhere else in the greenhouse. You could just drop it on there. This of course would be sunk down into this level. So if you wanted to put the flame out, you would just drop the lid that this comes with. And the name of this, I'll try to spin it around there. It's there. I don't know if these can be purchased online because I'm 99% sure I got this from Tractor Supply. So anyways, I'm very happy. If I do find this online, I'll put a link to this as well. But this would create a monster size heater for something as large as this greenhouse if you wanted to heat it up to a comfortable temperature. So guys, this has been going for about an hour now, and it is, I still see the fuel close to the top, so we burned very little of our fuel off, but it is putting out a nice amount of heat. I can already tell the difference in the greenhouse, and this fan is helping to circulate that heat. It's not just staying in one area, but I wanted to show you this can is still very cool to the touch. I don't have to worry about my tabletop being scorched. I can move this around. I can pick it up very carefully after I move the fan, but also, again, the #1 question I got last time around is how do you put it out? Now, once the fuel burns down and maybe you're halfway through the fuel, you can probably just lean over and blow it out. But that may not work in the beginning because you have so much fuel burning. So just remove your fan, remove your, well, let's just show you real quick. Remove your fan, remove your lid. The lid is red hot now, so you want to set this somewhere where it's not going to cause a problem. You're going to remove your, see, it's so hot it's actually cooling down. Okay, let's put this on top, put the flame out, boom. It starves itself for oxygen and it goes out very quickly. So again, these are red hot. I can feel it through these really thick gloves, and these are my favorite gloves because I don't have to worry about cutting myself when I'm working, burning myself, and as I've done many times. So that's the easiest way to make a 3-component heater, just 3 simple things. The sand is optional, but I think it's very important. But again, you can create it much larger, as I showed you with the large feeding pail. You could create something like that that would heat up a large area. Again, you got to have the safety equipment. I'm putting a link in the description to Simply Safe, but if you have a carbon monoxide detector, a smoke detector, battery operated of course, and a fire extinguisher, then you've got the primary things you need for safety. So just remember that it's so important above everything else is to be safe. I would hate for anybody to do something where they weren't paying attention and they didn't consider safety. So again, our heater is out. Let's just double check that there. Completely out. It starved itself out of oxygen very quickly. But again, this is something you put in your pantry, you forget about it, put a Post-it note on top of it or right on the side of the can, because if you're right on the top, that ink is going to burn away when you do light it. So just make sure you label it properly, you know what it is. Tape your quarter to the top of it along with some matches. inside preferably, because matches can get a little bit too much moisture sometimes depending on what environment you lived in. Especially ours, we have so much humidity, a box of matches would probably go bad in a high humid area. So just remember, this is a very safe way to make heat. And the most important thing is, if you want the cleanest fuel, go back to what I said about denatured alcohol. Buy a can of it and read. It's made for heating systems like this that make it very safe. Again, safety is the most important thing. So guys, everything I've used today, I put a link in the description, such as this fan. I think it's a really incredible piece of technology. It's been around for decades. And the system, I'm trying to remember, is it Peltier, something like that? If you'll put a comment down below and tell me exactly how it works. But I know the general principle is once the base of it heats up, there's a reaction there, and that's what gets this to working without any electricity, so you can slowly circulate air through the area you want to heat. 2 or 3 of these on the monster size heater would really work well, because you'd be dispersing heat in 3 different directions. So again, if you have a comment about this video or any previous video, please become a public subscriber first, and I'll put you to the front of the line. As I said, when you're receiving thousands of comments, it's just not possible, especially when you have a life to live rather than sitting in front of a screen, which isn't necessarily my favorite thing to do. So anyways, I hope you'll consider making one of these as an emergency backup heater. You can put it together in a matter of minutes and store it for 10 years. And as long as you properly seal the top, the fuel won't burn off. It'll stay in there. And just like a paint can filled with paint, it will be perfectly sealed and ready to go a decade later when and if you need it. Have a great day.